What's good? Who just pulled up? Chris. What's good, Chris? Good to see you, dude. Aaron. What's good, Aaron? How are you? I'm doing good, dude. Back in St. George. I was up north visiting my family for about 2 weeks or something, and so we're back on the regular schedule. Travis, what's good? LK, Mangelito. Chris just got back from the park. Sick, dude. You learn anything at the park today, Chris? You have a good session? All right, we're going to wait just like a tiny bit longer and then we'll get into this. But if you guys could try and blow up the stream, hit the like button, and try and get this pushed out to more people before we get started. So yeah, if you haven't already, hit the like button. I'd really appreciate it. Good sesh, nothing new. That's all right. That's how it goes. Gonna be going out in some hours to skate. Gotta do dad things first. That's what happens. Gotta take care of the fam. My last. Sub Local Joe. Not much, dude. Excited to be streaming for a little bit. I'm learning regular trays. I can only do them nollie. That's so funny. I understand that because I feel like nollie tray literally is not that hard because it's like a fakie tray, but you're popping with your. For me, my most coordinated foot is my right foot, so it's like, I don't know, nollie tray makes a lot of sense to me. Andrew Fowler, what's good, Local Joe? Not much, dude. All right. Okay, guys, let's get into this. So, the homie Steven Nixon, he's one of my patrons from Patreon. I'm going to be doing this regularly. So, what I'm doing is, if you join my Patreon, you can send me your clips and ask me to like critique them. And I'm just going to do it on stream. Everybody that sent me clips, I'm just going to do it once a week, critique the clips, give you guys like some thoughts, some feedback. And if it's helpful for them, I hope it's helpful for them. And then you guys all get to hear what we're talking about as well. So feel free to jump in the chat if there's anything, how to submit a kickflip clip. Dang, I just grabbed this shot because of your video. If you want me to critique your kickflip, you've just got to join my Patreon and then send me a link, like either a YouTube link or this guy did Dropbox, but just make a quick little edit of some kickflip attempts and then message it to me on Patreon, and then I'll go through it from there and do it on the weekly critiquing stream. But yeah, so if that's something you're interested in, I will be once a week critiquing all my Patreon subscribers, any of them that want me to. I'll critique them on stream. So Sean Doherty, sup Joe, I just watched a video where you say you dislike Jamie Griffin for skating flat ground. I wanted to ask you why you hate fun. I don't hate fun, Sean. It's just I feel like he's ruined Battle at the Barracks. I don't dislike him at all, and I actually think his skating is like interesting, but it's like the reason I like Battle at the Barracks was because I like seeing my favorite pros do tricks like super controlled, and he doesn't give me that vibe. He's just like really good at this one thing, and he can't even do it with like as much control or finesse or style as I want to see. So it is what it is. But let's go ahead and look at Steven's kickflips here. Like I said, feel free to, in the chat, give your thoughts on what you think Steven is doing wrong. I did look at this a little bit yesterday. I know that he does a few flat ground tricks, but most of the video is just kickflip attempts. It's a nice fakey shove, Steven. You kept your body right over the board where it needed to be. Have you seen Slante? Not yet. Yeah, so what do you guys, I'll leave it up to you guys first. What do you guys think in the chat he's doing wrong with his kickflips? I want to hear your guys' thoughts. What's up, Sammy? Yo, Sammy, so once a week I'm gonna be reviewing Patreon subscribers' clips. So I mean you're better than me. I'm not sure if you want me to review your clips, but that's what we're doing here. So this is Steven Nixon. He's actually all right. He's been a patron for a while, so shout out to Steven. Even before I was really trying to be consistent with it. All right, so Chris Bambro says the back knee needs to suck up to the chest more. So let's look. So he's got a good crouch. Okay. I think his back knee is high enough. Not lifting his back leg, and he ain't kicking his foot out. So I actually disagree with that as well. I think he's kicking his foot out. But I see what you're saying. The reason I think when he pops, his weight is over his back foot and it causes it to rocket like that. Yeah. I think Sammy is, in my opinion, the closest on this one, at least according to what I think. So if you look at when he goes to jump, all of his weight goes over his back foot. That one was actually a lot better. But so in order to kickflip, you've got to get the nose of your board into the strike zone. So let me pause it right. So that's where the board needs to be before he flicks. So the board, before he actually flicks the board, the nose of his board needs to come under his leading hip before he flicks. Does that make sense? So let me see if I can find, let me pull up. I don't know who I should use as an example. I guess I'll do Felipe. Let's pull up the Instagram clip. This clip has been going absolutely viral, at least according to my standards. So let's pull it up. All right. Okay, let me share my screen with you guys. Share screen. All right. So here we go. How do we pause this? Okay. We're going to have to find these. Okay. This works right here. All right. So look at, do you guys see before I flick the board, my nose is up. I pop the board and the board is up and underneath my right hip. That allows me to lead out with my knee and then flick. Whereas if we look at, let's pull up, if we pull up Steven right here, Steven, he's not getting to that position until after he's flicked, which is kind of weird. I feel like most of the time, if you watch him flicking, let's watch. He's the nose is way out in front, and part of that is here. Let me get rid of this. Look how close his feet are together. He has to slide his foot like so far away to get any contact with the nose, if that makes sense. So he's got to slide from the middle of the board all the way to the nose. There's a really good chance with this kickflip foot position that he's going to have a hard time actually keeping the nose underneath his hip, because when he crouches down, look how far away his hip is from the nose of the board. If the goal is to get the nose underneath your hip so that way it's in the proper position to flick, having a wider stance makes that more simple. Now, there's other pros and cons to like a super wide stance or not. But if we look at Felipe, let's look at Felipe real quick. Oh, here we go. See if we can pause it. Okay, so if you guys can see Felipe right now, if you zoomed up on that clip of Felipe, you'd actually see that his front foot is covering the back two bolts on his front truck. So he's actually covering half of the bolts. He's pretty much standing right over the axle, and that puts his hip and his knee already so close to the front of the nose. Now, obviously, if Steven were to do this, Steven would have to completely readjust how he flicks, but it's going to simplify getting the board into the strike zone underneath his hip. I hope that makes sense to you guys. But I think Steven here is making life harder on himself by having such a narrow stance. It's putting his weight over the back truck, whereas he needs to get his weight, at least when he's up in the air and about to flick, he wants to get his weight over the front truck. So you want to jump up and have the front truck come underneath your front hip, and then that way you can lead out with your knee and get that flick on the way up. So it's going to help your timing as well, being able to have a little bit wider stance. Somebody mentioned he's turning his shoulders slightly, but really not too bad. I think the biggest thing is that he's not jumping up and getting his weight over the front truck. So you want to jump up, weight over the front truck, and then flick out. So we've got, he looks like he's doing a few more flat ground tricks. Oh, he's trying to do it in a line. Yeah, so that one looked pretty good. It just looks to me that Steven is leaning so far back that he's kicking the board out in front of him. That one was pretty good. That one, Steven actually stayed over the board, but now he's got to learn how to re-flick with keeping his weight over the board. So there's another one where he just leaned back and kicked the board out in front of him. Basically, you want to jump up above your front truck, get that nose up under your right hip, and then flick. You want to wait for the board to get into the strike zone before you flick. Let's go ahead and read some comments real quick. Looks like that last one, he needed to flick through the nose more. Let that front leg extend a bit more with the flick. He's also popping behind him instead of straight down. Yo, I just did a backside flip on my channel because they're always sketch. I would love some help. So Asher, what we're doing is for anybody that joins my Patreon, I will review your clips once a week if you want me to. I'll put the link up real quick if that's something you're into. So I'm kind of reserving this service or whatever for my patrons, but you kind of want your shoulder and head parallel to your knee, I feel like. Your front. Yeah, I know that Jake Hayes, the way he describes it is he points his toe diagonally forward and his chest is facing the same direction as his toe. So like his whole orientation is like matched up. He's got it, like you said, just some slight tweaks. It's a great idea, Joe. I don't think anyone else does this. Like pop out behind the tail, not behind him. Like pop out behind the tail. Yeah, I just think you can see as he goes to pop, you can see his board is wanting to like shoot forward during the pop. It's like his board is just like, because he's putting so much pressure on the back, it's wanting to shoot forward in front of him. So he's just got to realize that the secret to all this is getting your body over that front truck and letting it's almost like if you were to look down right before you flick, the nose of the board is almost right below your head. Let's see Felipe's real quick. So let's see him at the top of his flick. Okay, so that's a pretty good illustration of right as you're starting your flick, the nose of the board should be pretty much under your head. If we look at Steven, Let's pull up Steven. Let me get rid of this one. Let's look at Steven. Where is Steven's nose right before he flicks? Okay. You can see the nose is way out in front. It's in line with his front knee, and it's way out in front of Steven's head. If Steven were to stay way more over his front truck, then this kickflip position, his body is in the right place, but his board is too far forward. Does that make sense? If we were able to pick Steven's board up and slide it back about a foot, maybe like, I don't know, somewhere between 6 inches to a foot. If we were able to push that back, then his knee would be way out in front of the nose, and he would be in a much better position to get leverage to actually flick through the nose. But because his stance is so narrow, it's pushing the board forward. So let's see right here. So see how narrow his stance is? He's like, he can't have hardly any weight over that front truck because look at his stance. His stance is all on the back half of the board. And I'm not trying to be mean to Steven or anything. I'm just trying to give you good critique so that hopefully this can help you improve your kickflip. But because your stance is already so far behind the nose, it's going to be a hell of a time trying to get that nose underneath your hip in order to flick. So what I would suggest to Steven in order to practice and fix what's going wrong here, I would suggest practicing ollieing and thinking about, okay, before I drag my foot, I need to get my nose under my head. So trying to get his weight over his front truck, over the nose, before he drags the ollie, practicing that motion with the ollie, I think he'll notice instantly his ollies are way easier because he's using leverage to actually get everything up in the air efficiently, rather than right now he's just kind of like kicking things away. So if Steven were to practice, do like 100 ollies with a wider stance, so I would suggest like maybe 2 inches, put his front foot like 2 inches behind the bolts, and then focus on trying to get the nose to come up underneath his hips, maybe like slightly, like almost like you can look down and see your nose. It's really close, but like you should be able to see your nose come underneath your head. So it's like the nose comes between your legs before you drag it up. If he can do that, if he can widen his stance, it'll make it easier to get the nose underneath his hip. And then once he's in that position, then the flick is just going to come naturally. Steven's flicking just fine, but he's not putting the board in the right position to be able to benefit from the flick that he's doing. So widen the stance, keep the weight a little bit more distributed over the front foot so that as you pop, you can stay over the front nose and get the board into the strike zone and then flick. Mark Hunstein says, can you elaborate on getting the nose under your hip? Sorry if you said it, I just got here. Yeah, let me pull up a video. Let's go studio. Actually, let me hide my screen real quick. Oh, it's not even up. All right. Okay. YouTube. All right. Okay. We're going to find Catersilla's kickflip. Where are you, Cater? Catersilla's tray flip. Catersilla's back three. Catersilla's crooked grind. Kareem wants Catersilla. All right, Catersilla. Here we go. All right, guys, let me share my screen real quick. So I'm gonna get rid of this. All right, so Steven, I want you to pay attention to the position that Cater Scylla is getting into. You can even see it right here on the thumbnail that I made. Do you see it? And Mark, this is for you as well, Mark Hunstein. Do you see how in this thumbnail, how Cater's nose of his board is underneath his right hip, right before he flicks? That allows him to lead with his knee and gives him the most leverage to really flick the board. So if you don't get into this position, if you don't get your knee out in front of the nose, what's going to happen is you're going to kick the board away, basically, rather than dragging it up and making the board rotate underneath you. If the board is in front of you, you're just going to kick it further in front of you. You need to get the board underneath you so then you can flick it and keep it underneath you, if that makes sense. If it's in front of you, you have no shot, which is what Steven's doing. So we can watch this real quick. Yeah, let's watch it.
I think everybody wishes that they could kickflip like Cater Scylla, but obviously Cater Scylla has been like a skateboard prodigy since he was like 8 years old. So the rest of us have a lot of catching up to do. But after studying Cater Scylla's kickflip, I've broken down his technique, and today we're gonna see if an average skater like you or me can actually copy Cater Scylla's kickflip. I want you to tell me in the comments whose kickflip do you want me to break down and try and copy next. So there are basically 3 different keys to Cater Scylla's kickflip. The first one is the back foot positioning, the second is the front foot positioning, and the third one is how he actually flicks the board. So key number 1, you'll know.
So just so you know, the foot position is completely preference, and yeah, there's benefits, there's pros and cons to different foot positionings. But the third thing that I talked about, how he flicks it, this is pretty much non-negotiable. If you want a good kickflip, anybody that has a good kickflip is going to be doing it this way. But the foot position that I'm talking about, the front foot and the back foot, this is more preference. But the third thing that I mentioned, how he flicks, that's what is really the key and is a fundamental to kickflipping. So
notice that Cater puts his foot really close to the bolt, so you can see there's a lot of space behind his foot left on the tail, probably like 2 inches. So he's like got his foot in this position right here. What that does is that allows him to get the tail down quicker to the ground. If he's popping from back here, he's got to push the tail from all the way up here to the ground. But if he's got his foot placed right here, he needs to push basically half as far to get the tail hitting the ground. Not only does this make the pop easier and more effortless, it also gets the nose up in the air faster, which is gonna come into play a little bit later on. As well as being close to the bolts, you notice that his foot is slid.
So you guys probably can see where this is going, but essentially Cater's foot positioning, and not only his foot positioning, but his setup makes it easy for him to get the nose up high. So that's because his wheels are so big and because he puts his foot kind of closer to the bolts when he's about to pop, both of those things help him get the tail down faster, but they also help him get the nose up higher. So those 2 things are going to help get his nose into the strike zone, which is what we're going to see in just a second.
Just a little bit towards the heel side of the board. So instead of being completely right behind the bolt, he's just a little bit over this way. What this does is it pops the board a little bit crooked and helps prevent him from air flicking. Okay, so the second key to Cater's kickflip technique is how much he points his toe. So you'll notice that his toe is really face forward, and that does 2 things. Number 1, it gets more of his foot on the board. So rather than having his heels hanging off the board out here, he's able to really grab the board with his whole foot. So basically that just gives him more stability while he's rolling, getting ready to do his kickflip. The second thing I notice about it is because his foot is turned so far forward, that opens his hip so that he can really flick out naturally like he's doing like a karate kick. When your hips are closed like this, it's really hard to get that flick, but if you turn your foot open, the more open it is, the easier it is to flick out forward. The third.
That's also, if you guys have seen my Felipe Mota kickflip video, that's something that Felipe Mota does as well. He really shifts his body open so that he can flick more naturally, because if you're too squared off, it's going to be awkward to get that flick.
Third and final thing that I noticed about Cater's kickflip is how he really leads with his knee. So you imagine my elbow is Cater's knee. He gets that knee way out in front of the nose of the board. So rather than kicking the board from back here, first drags his knee out in front, and that pulls his foot to actually flip the board. And
so this is the part that our guy Steven is missing, is he's not getting that board, the nose of his board, underneath his hips, and so he's not able to lead out with his knees. So let's find.
And that's how Cater can pull his kickflips so high.
Yeah.
High up.
You see how Cater is pulling the kickflip with his knee? If the board is level with your knee, or like if your board and your knee are, sorry, I'm having a hard time explaining this, but if the knee is over the nose of the board, just they're in the same, like here's the nose, here's your knee. When you go to kick, it's just going to kick the board out. But if you basically put your knee over here and the nose is right here, then when you flick, it pulls the nose forward, creating that flick. So you can actually pull the board up into the kickflip rotation. So Steven, this is what you're missing right here, is you need to get the nose. Look how the nose is directly underneath Cater's leading hip, and look how far his knee is out in front of the nose. I know I sound like a broken record, but you need to figure out how to get into this position. It's going to be a lot easier, Steven, if you widen your stance. It's going to move. It's going to basically put your stance closer to the nose so that it's easier to get into this position. So your very, very narrow stance. Let's take a look real quick. That one looks a little bit wider. What's good, Dane? How are you? Okay. All right, sorry. Let's find a good clip of Steven. We need a side angle. Even with that heel flip, his stance is so narrow and over his back foot. So you're gonna have pretty much no chance of staying over your board with a stance this narrow. Like you haven't even begun jumping and you're already trying to skate on just the back half of the board. So by widening your stance, you're basically utilizing the full length of the board to not only give you more stability, but also in order to be in a position where it's easy to get the nose underneath your hip and lead with your knee. So, and to be clear, those two things need to happen before you flick. The nose needs to get underneath your hip, and your knee needs to get out in front of the nose before you even start to flick the nose. Before there's that friction, that contact of the flick on the nose of the board, you've got to first get the board into the correct position, into the strike zone, as I call it. Get the nose up under your hip. And then once it's under your hip, it'll be easy to get your knee out in front and get a good flick. So I just, again, I would say to kind of finish my bit on this would be two things: widen your stance, and then focus on getting the nose up under your hip and your knee out in front. And I think that's going to help you a lot. Let's go to the comments. Widening your stance effectively moves the board backwards and placing it under your shoulders, right? Yeah. Obviously, it's not like there's a right way or a wrong way, because sometimes a narrow stance is good. Like you watch Luan's tray flips, his tray flips look about like this. But with a tray flip, he's trying to push the tail and do that scoop with his back foot. So it's a completely different thing. Whereas when you're trying to flick with your front foot, you need to keep the nose underneath your body, not the tail. You need to get the nose underneath your body. So he's basically setting up like a tray flip almost in terms of his stance, like how wide it is, and then trying to kickflip from there. So if he would widen out his stance, it would give him more stability and help him in terms of putting the nose underneath his body so that he can actually flick and stay over the board rather than like this. I'm predicting this kickflip is going to shoot out in front of him. I don't know, but let's watch. Oh, it's a heel flip. He does the same stance for both though. Okay, this is a kickflip. And see how he kicks it out in front of him? Also, because he's kicking rather than pulling, it creates this like half varial. Like it wants, the board wants to tweak. Whereas if the board was underneath you, you'd be able to pull it and pull it straight forward. Yeah, he's just too far behind it. Mark, how do we get you to critique our kickflip? Do we send a link? So Mark, anybody that joins my Patreon, I'll link it right here. Anybody that joins my Patreon can then send me their clips. Just send me a link on Patreon in the messages. And then once a week, I'm going to be going through and basically just critiquing everybody's tricks. I mean, obviously, I'm not the best skater, but if you want advice and you want my point of view, especially with like simple tricks like this, like a kickflip, yeah, I can definitely critique your kickflips and whatnot. So you can just join the Patreon. The link's right there, and then send me a message with. This guy did a Dropbox video. Steven did a Dropbox and just uploaded a little edit. Whereas other people have like sent me like they uploaded it to YouTube and then went from and sent me that link. So that's pretty much it, guys. I've got to go, but shout out to everybody joining the Patreon. Big things are coming with the Patreon. With enough people joining it, then we can start trying to collab with big pro skaters. Like I'd love to fly out and collab with Tom Asta. I would love to collab with Wade Desarmo. I would love to collab with Jamie Foy. There's a lot of people that if we have enough money, then we can go to them and say, hey, can we pay you, X amount of money for 3 hours of your time to really work on a trick together and work on kind of the principles behind what makes professional skateboarders' tricks work so efficiently. So that's the whole point behind the Patreon. I appreciate everybody that's joining it. Thank you, everybody that came to the live stream. Like I said, if you want me to critique your clips, join the Patreon and send them to me, and we'll do this once a week. And hopefully it'll help you guys out. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I got to go. I love you all. Make every day a Friday, and I'll see you guys next time. I love you.